no.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the City Council Workshop on Transit Supportive Development. We will start with a Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Roberto. Please rise as you're able.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, please call the roll.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Here.
Councilwoman Helsley.
Here.
Councilwoman McKenzie.
Here.
Councilwoman Parker. Councilwoman Ryder.
Here.
Councilman Roberto.
Here.
Councilwoman Singh. Vice Mayor Smith.
Here.
And Councilman Thomas. 7 members present, Vice Mayor.
All right. Well, that is a quorum and a party. We shall get started with the workshop. I want to thank everybody that's going to present today. Thank you for members of the public that are watching online, and thank you for those who have showed up today. Today, I'll start by saying also a thanks for members of CAT, Knoxville, Knox County Planning, and the consultant who has delivered so efficiently on this work, MKSK. Thank you for traveling here to be with us today. This has been a priority for this council for a long time, particularly in our retreat this year. We said this is one of our top priorities, and this being encouraging development on corridors, particularly reinvesting in blighted properties and encouraging that, as well as incentivizing greater utilization of our newly reimagined public transportation network. So that's not an easy thing to thread, all of those things together at once. And before we get started, I'll just say this is not the beginning, end, or the middle. This is an input to continued investment in this topic. This council also, at its retreat, made a priority of the updating the city's comprehensive plan, which is 20 plus years out of date. And so this will be a good input to that as it begins later this year. I view this as an input and part of visioning for that publicly informed, involved process that will begin and take quite a bit of time, but land use is important, and where it mixes with transit is equally important. So with that, I will pass the mic over to the presenters. Maybe Mr. Thorne, you'll kick us off, and
Yes.
We'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you,
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Smith and Council for allowing us to present today on this transit supported development planning project. I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to do a team overview and then talk about the study background and objectives. So we can go to that next slide. Obviously, Knoxville Area Transit's part of this team, Knoxville, Knox County Planning, City of Knoxville. And then we have a consultant team, which is MKSK, Development Strategies, and Nelson Nygaard. I think now is as good as any time to make introductions, and I guess we'll start all the way to my left at the very end, and we'll work way over.
Terry Gilhula, Knoxville, Knox County Planning Staff.
Doug Burton, Knoxville, Knox County Planning Staff, and the Transportation Planning Organization Coordinator.
Allie Kitron with Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Aubrey Wyland with Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Sean Hare with MKSK.
Aaron Kowalski, Principal in Charge with MKSK.
And Amy Brooks with Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Next slide, please. All right, study background. So Knoxville, Knox County Planning is a partner with Knoxville Area Transit to look at better align basically the land use, transit access, and economic opportunity. Obviously, this is the goal of any city and public transit agency is to align these three things. This project was supported by and funded for a grant for the Federal Transit Administration's, the Areas of Persistent Poverty grant that we received and were awarded in 2021. So planning's initial analysis of the economic and community conditions was done to identify potential areas which highlight opportunities for investment along the transit corridors. And so I think this first item, increasing CAT ridership, I think this aligns perfectly, this planning project aligns perfectly with the work we've already done and that Councilmember Smith has already talked about, and that is CAT reimagined and the groundwork we laid in terms of increasing frequency, adding more consistent service. We have seen ridership increases in fiscal year 2025. Actually, our ridership in this last fiscal year was as high as it's been in 10 years. We want to continue that CAT ridership increases. Also want to unlock potential of transit corridors. So transit-supported development along these corridors reduces car dependency, creates all-day demand for transit, and it also provides access to more opportunity. The other item is catalyze our corridor investment, and these investments in the areas has potential to benefit many people and also help create economic benefit. And then finally, create more housing. This is objective aligns perfectly with the mayor's and the council's initiatives to create more housing throughout Knoxville. At this time, I'll turn it over to Knoxville, Knox County Planning Executive Director Amy Brooks.
Thank you, Isaac. So one of the first tasks of this project was to create a tool to identify opportunities, areas of high and low economic opportunity, but also that would be considered for development readiness. So what parts of the city have where there's opportunity for development and additional community investment. So planning staff conducted a peer review of other municipalities' priority location tools, and this informed the development of our own tool that we created. The result of this was a mapping tool that highlights areas with the greatest socioeconomic challenges as well as the areas of greatest development readiness. And Aubrey's going to give you an overview of this tool today. And if you want to dive a little deeper, we can make time for that as well. I'll turn over to Aubrey.
Thank you. So we put together an index based on the findings from that peer review where we could explore the areas of high and low economic and community resources. So this is a still view of an interactive map that we built. You're looking at the map on the right, and then on the left there's a diagram explaining the color code. So this is a map of both the development readiness and the social need. The darker blue an area is shaded, the greater the development readiness, and the darker pink that an area is shaded, the greater the social need. So by that logic, if it's purple, it's both. In particular, we're most interested in the three darkest colors at the top of that diagram. The darkest shade of purple, that's at 12 o'clock on the diagram, are areas that are the highest development readiness and the highest social need, where those areas overlap the most. The sort of red, violet, burgundy at 10 o'clock is the high social need, moderate development and readiness areas. And then the darkest blue shade at about 2 o'clock on the diagram are areas that are the highest development readiness and moderate social need. A couple of other features that are present on this map, if you open it up and explore it on your own, there's on the green bar at the top, there's a Get Data button where you can see all the data that we use to create the index, and you can download it from there. And there's also a methodology page where you can review the full methodology, see all the data explanations, and how we made the map.
Is this map live somewhere?
It's accessible.
Because you just said click and download, so is it live?
It's not live for the public yet, no.
Is it, okay. I think the issue is, we can't see that, it's too tiny. And this is, I don't know, Lynn. Anyway, we're having
Yeah, some of us
difficulty.
have a laptops. Does anybody have the PDF? You could email to Mr. Johnson real quick and we can share it. The presentation.
Yeah, yes, yes, we can do that. And keep in mind, we're gonna post this onto our website here shortly, and you all will be able to take a closer look at this. And like I said, we can do a deeper dive as well.
Yeah, I don't know for my colleagues, but I could use a refresher again on the colors if you would, just so we know what we're looking at.
Yeah, so we're just looking at generally where all these areas are the high on the development readiness or the high social need. So the darker purple, like that middle darkest purple on the diagram, are areas that are the highest development readiness and the highest social need. So where they're gesturing with the laser pointer, those are some of the areas that are the highest in both categories. That sort of burgundy color are the areas that are the highest social need, but moderate development readiness. And then the dark blue are areas that are the highest development readiness and moderate social need.
And the red.
So if it's a darker shade of red or pink, then those are areas that are social need, but not high development readiness. Blue is opposite. If it's only blue and not purple, then those are areas that are more development ready, but less socially in need of investment or ready for investment.
Council, I've just emailed a copy of that presentation to you for your emails.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're gonna turn it over to our, if you all have additional questions, we can entertain those, but I wanted to turn it over to MKSK to walk you through the second phase of this work.
Just a quick question, sorry. Councilman Roberto, maybe not quick, but a question.
It'll be quick. It's less of a question, more of a statement. I know we just got this email, but it would have been very helpful for council to have received this earlier, preferably not today, but in the last few days, so that we could have looked over this before coming to the workshop. So just for future reference, when we're doing these workshops, I know all my colleagues, I think, would appreciate having these earlier so we can look at them. Thank you.
We've designed this presentation to be hopefully pretty efficient on time so that there is room for discussion here. So I know you all have it now and are going to be looking, and we'll probably have some more questions about that mapping. So just know we will have time. We're not intending to fill the next 45 minutes still of slides. That's not our intent. As I mentioned before, my name is Sean Hare. I'm a project manager with MKSK. We're a firm of urban planners and landscape architects. We've been leading this study, working with CAT and Knoxville, Knox County Planning. As mentioned before by Isaac, we've been joined by two other consultants on our team, a firm called Development Strategies, who specializes in real estate market analysis, and Nelson Nygaard, who specializes in active transportation planning and non-motorized transportation. Amy outlined what was kind of deemed as phase one, which kind of helped lay the groundwork for this study to begin and led to the mapping tool we just discussed. This study, the work that our consultant team was leading, is kind of summarized here as a phase two, which has sort of three overall stages. An initial stage of preparation, we did a series of kickoff meetings and engagement with some subject matter experts, initial kind of work sessions, understanding of the different corridors of the city, of course, discussions with CAT about the work they did with CAT Reimagined as well. That led to a second stage in our process of exploration, where we looked at some existing conditions related to market and demographic analysis, transit supportive strategies, kind of, again, another round of conversations with subject matter experts in the local area, and then additionally started to think about implementation and next steps, and some transit supportive strategy concept exploration. And then in our third and final stage of our work, where we are now, has been working on a kind of draft report that obviously includes a lot more detail than the presentation we're going to share here today, or are sharing here today, some additional work sessions, some final documents, and this is one of a couple of kind of presentations we're giving during this part to different groups. So at a high level, part of the driving reasoning behind this study and what we are hoping to uncover with this study is a reflection on the benefits of transit-supported development. Isaac mentioned some of this earlier on, but obviously there's an opportunity here with the investments made in the CAT system and the recognition that CAT infrastructure and operations run along primary corridors throughout the city. So how can we balance and take best advantage with future economic development of existing and recent investments in transportation infrastructure? And that can include both in the transit system, but also in streetscape projects and other kinds of transportation improvements that have happened along these major corridors throughout the city. And so the goal here would be to identify opportunities and potential strategies to look forward towards creating denser, walkable mixed-use areas centered around or located near a transit stop. When we say mixed use, that can happen both vertically in terms of in the same footprint of a single building with ground floor retail and upper floors of other uses, or it can happen some ways horizontally. It can be, at a prominent intersection, there can be commercial uses on one corner and residential on another, or residential on a block away that can walk and can easily access and meet those daily needs. We want to emphasize non-motorized infrastructure as well. Recognizing that users of transit systems are also pedestrians and travel by other means as well as along their daily commutes, whether that be to work, school, or for recreation, shopping, what have you. And then again, as kind of reiterating some of what Isaac mentioned before, using this as a way to help revitalize economically challenged areas and kind of key locations along these corridors. So we were generally the study area that we were looking at. It generally stays within the city limits here, primarily obviously because of the relationship with the CAT system. We're kind of looking at the extents of where that CAT system reaches today. So what you're seeing on this map is combining some of the mapping that Aubrey shared just a few minutes ago. What were kind of the top levels there is what's in the background there in those tones of purple. And then laid on top of that are the current CAT service after the CAT reimagined process. So the red lines indicate routes with 15-minute service, 15-minute frequency of service. The blue lines indicate 30 minutes, and the kind of more faded pink-purple lines indicate 60-minute service. So we want to recognize that obviously for transit users, 15-minute is more efficient, it's more helpful and effective for daily needs, but also understand that not every route, unfortunately, doesn't have that level of service. So we need to look at opportunities that can benefit and can build off of both the investment in 15-minute service, but other corridors as well that are still served by transit, just maybe at a little lesser frequency for now. So in looking at those different corridors and wanting to identify some opportunity areas and some sites to use as examples, we developed a series of different questions. A lot of these were used both in our analysis process, but also in the conversations we had with different subject matter experts. And so these include, what one of those mapping areas that Aubrey alluded to is this located in? What is the transit access like? Is it directly at that corner, immediately adjacent to a certain parcel, or is it a couple blocks away? Is this site quite development ready? Has there been interest in recent years? What are the kind of current zoning standards or zoning conditions for that site? Importantly, a conversation that came up that was really helpful input was what's the sort of corridor's maintenance and operation status? Is it a city-owned corridor and maintained, or is it maintained by TDOT? Those just at times can create challenges for development. They just have some different requirements that can influence kind of the way that they can build their different sites as well. And obviously TDOT corridors tend to be kind of more major corridors designed for higher levels of service for automobiles, and thus can sometimes be can be a hindrance sometimes to more walkable environments just because road conditions can be wider, speeds can be higher, things like that. Really importantly, I want to emphasize this, and we'll do that as we continue on here with showing you some of the examples here in just a moment. Looking at different locations along these corridors throughout the city, we really wanted to emphasize that any example sites we looked at to explore, could this be a viable opportunity for transit supportive development, that it importantly can do just that, which is to serve as an example for potential other sites in the future. We'll get into some typologies of how we kind of categorize the different example locations we looked at, but really importantly, we want to recognize that not all of the sites that are identified here as examples, they're not the only areas in the city. There's not only one underutilized retail parcel of land on a corridor, or one intersection in the middle of a neighborhood that could stand to see some new investment. Of course not. There can be multiple of those things, but we wanted to make sure that we could have an example that seemed pretty clear to understand, especially with it having its own unique context, and again, could be an important example perhaps for other areas in the future. And then kind of paired with that, and we'll talk about some typologies that we've set up to kind of categorize different example locations, are what are the surrounding uses and contexts? Is this 1 block away from a neighborhood? Is this kind of a local neighborhood commercial area? Is it a shopping plaza? Is it something else? What is that surrounding use or existing use, and what are the contexts around these different examples? And then how does this align with city priorities, and feedback may be gathered at any other planning processes? And then are there any sort of high-level issues we just want to be aware of in, using this as an example for, like, is it a brownfield or anything like that we need to be aware of? Identified sites that we went through, and I'll explain more here in a second about that. They did not necessarily need to respond positively to every one of these questions. It's okay and realistic, quite frankly, to recognize that, every location is going to have some level of challenge. It's just how much, and does it cross the threshold of not being a feasible site for, potential new investment? But those were the kinds of questions we were using to help identify different locations. Additionally, as part of the analysis process, our sub-consultants at Development Strategies looked at kind of generalized, as they've called them here, corridor-based submarkets. So just different general geographic areas radiating out from kind of prominent corridors throughout the city to get a sense of kind of the existing socioeconomic and development market there. And so they did some data analysis for that, which will certainly be packaged up and included in our report. And just for time's sake, we didn't include it all in this presentation here today, but we're happy to kind of take questions about that and certainly share more information as you need it. And then the last thing I'm going to cover before I hand it to my teammate here, Aaron, to dive in on these a little bit more specifically, are the typologies that we prepared. So in our study, we prepared 4 typologies to help kind of understand different example sites throughout the city. So the first one being infill development. Think of that as likely in an area where the surrounding context is built out, whether that's in a neighborhood or just along a commercial corridor. But for whatever reason, this specific parcel or a couple of parcels of land are vacant or are underutilized, and this could be potentially seen as a candidate for higher and better use in the future. A neighborhood node has a slightly different context in that it's certainly going to emphasize that it is in a neighborhood setting. Again, it's going to be along a corridor, but the idea here is that this is probably in an area where there's some commercial uses in the neighborhood, perhaps a mix of whether they're vacant or not, or underutilized land. But still, it's an opportunity to kind of meet those daily needs for nearby residents, and that could be regardless of whether they're a transit user frequently or not. Creating a walkable, accessible node in their neighborhood that provides different uses to meet their daily needs is critical as well. And then in the last 2, we have plaza redevelopment. So that's looking at different shopping plazas throughout the city that obviously, generally the history with shopping plazas is they're developed along major corridors to be commercial centers. Some have a great track record of longevity and reinvention of themselves to stay vibrant and active, and others do not. And so what's important about looking at them is that they usually take up considerable land, which offers a lot of opportunity for different future uses. And of course, they sit on major corridors. That's how they were accessible to the broader community when they were first constructed. And then the last one is a catalytic site. And that's a little bit of a unique category in that that is one that's used to kind of identify maybe really unique circumstances, perhaps those sites could be put into one of these other buckets, but they usually offer the opportunity to do a little bit more significant kind of transformation or reinvention of the area around it, and it'll probably include a couple of parcels or blocks potentially in that site. And so my colleague Aaron here is going to start in just a second, is going to walk through a little bit more detail about each of the 4 typologies we identified, and then also provide you all with an example for each and kind of just talk about some of the opportunities we started to look at, and then he'll conclude by talking about some of the next steps coming. So before I move off of that, is there any questions about what I just talked about? I know that's a lot of background and analysis work, but I wanted to just make sure. Okay. Take it away, Aaron.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yeah, I think this might be a good point, but maybe not. And this is just a general question, is about one of the problems that's along the corridors is by visually you can see property that looks like it's inactive, surface parking lots, vacated retail, et cetera. That I think is considered not available under standard definition because people aren't doing anything active. They're not trying to sell it. It's sitting there. How do you identify property like that with the right incentives could be made available? You know, a proactive approach to the property owners. That's kind of a challenge because you've got this property that's kind of lying dormant. So if I could just kind of throw that out there, was that kind of part of your study or incorporated into this plan?
Yes, thank you, Counselor, and good to see you again. So again, my name's Aaron Kowalski with MKSK. So as part of our recommendations with each of these different typologies and the example sites that are really designed to be conversation starters, the idea then is that those can be used to start to have some of those conversations. A lot of times what property owners need is to see examples that are relevant to them and their community of what can begin to happen. The other thing that through this process we're going to include some recommendations on are how the development community can be engaged. And I know through our stakeholder process we talked with several local and regional developers, but beginning to help them to understand the opportunity along these corridors, since it really is an area where they haven't been entirely active in the past. And then the last thing I'll mention is knowing that the community is getting ready to go through a comprehensive planning process. We're also including recommendations on how residents and business owners along these corridors can be engaged more broadly through that process and learn more about transit supportive development through this study and the examples as an input into that comprehensive plan. So hopefully that answers your question.
It's a lot. It kind of shows me actually, you know, what stage we're at too, and that's helpful. Is it anticipated that something that might be helpful would be doing an inventory of this type of property, not necessarily over the whole city, but just along the corridors where you actually did a study and did an inventory of property that is being lying dormant? Is that anticipated?
So we've worked with the tool that was developed by staff as part of phase 1 as really that quantitative input that helped us identify those areas that fell into those categories that were areas of, areas of need and investment and areas ready for investment. And the methodology, was used to do that. What we did is took that data and we looked at far more than just the examples we're looking at today along these corridors to identify, what are the ones that really rose to the top from a scoring perspective. But you're right. I think that through, coming out of this effort, there could be those tools, those same tools and that same methodology could be used more broadly, not only along the corridors identified as part of this study, but broadly in the city, along corridors to identify those sites, complete an inventory of those sites. Oftentimes, then, really you can start having those community conversations, especially during a comprehensive planning process to understand what that future land use could look like and what the community would like to see in those areas. And that's another way to begin to do that. And then as some of those properties start to become available, you've got your land use in place through your comprehensive plan to begin to start to think about how those redevelop.
Okay.
Can I say that back to you?
Please.
You didn't inventory every piece of property along every corridor, but you've highlighted some that are obvious examples to expand upon. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
And we developed a methodology that could be replicated elsewhere.
Understood. Thank you.
So as Sean mentioned, I'm going to offer a little bit more detail on these typologies. And think of these typologies as kind of explanations of the different types of development that can inform future land use as we start to think about redevelopment in these corridor areas and these examples. And so you can see, images here as well as a handful of bullet points. The idea with infill development is it fits in with the character of the neighborhoods that exist. It builds upon what exists. It expands upon community character. The other thing, as far as infill is concerned, it really can help to begin to achieve some of the city's goals for middle housing. And I know you all put a lot of effort into that. And so as through this planning process, we've thought through ways that that effort can be calibrated and integrated into transit supportive development. From an infill perspective, this is really sensitive development of key sites along those corridors or within neighborhoods. Often it's gateways to neighborhoods as well. We, as we were exploring these areas, we went out on a tour of all of these different corridors with staff, and we walked a lot of these areas. And, there's a lot of wonderful, wonderful neighborhoods, and then you have these corridors and some of these underinvested in sites along them. And it's really an opportunity to knit those corridors back into the neighborhoods, and that's what infill development does. And it can range from varied housing types, commercial, office, and mixed use. So the example of infill development, and these are sometimes sites that people aren't thinking about and really can help with opportunities for housing development. So just to orient folks, this is located off Sutherland Avenue, and it's off of Liberty Street where Riley Foods is. There's the coffee roaster.
Sorry, just for a second. Could you use your cursor or somebody use kind of a highlight as you discuss? Thank you.
Yeah,
just start
of
with
course.
Sutherland where
Yeah,
thank you.
Sutherland's up on the northern edge there, and there's a number of cat stops. And so the intersection of Sutherland and Liberty, there's a large parcel of undeveloped land, kind of right there as that Sean is highlighting. And so it's located adjacent to Riley Foods, which is an active manufacturing employment type use. It's also located right off of the Third Creek Greenway. And so one of the aspects we looked at here is not only do we have an empty piece of property within a neighborhood near an employment center and a daycare, but we've also got access to CAT. Transit, we've got access to a greenway, so not only could this be transit supportive, but also trail connected development. And this is an area where we're already starting to see some middle housing developing. There's some new townhomes under construction right now. They probably are completed at this point or close to it. And so this is an example of an infill site that is a vacant site within a neighborhood and really could achieve the city's goals of transit-supported development as well as middle housing. It's a large enough site that you could get some economy of scale with housing development so that, you could get a number of units in of different scales. And then we've included a number of precedent images here to help you to understand kind of what would fit in this site. The site's about 7 acres, 7.5 acres. So we have an example on the left. I can't remember exactly the community that this is in, but you can see that there's a mix of different kinds of housing, but it fits in with the neighborhood character and density. You can see as we're looking at other images there, there's connection opportunities to the Greenway. maybe opportunities for some park and recreational enhancements. We know that there's some park property nearby. And maybe it's an opportunity to work with the development community to explore a different kind of middle housing. For instance, in the bottom right corner, there is an example of a cottage court type development, which are smaller homes with kind of shared lots and kind of a parking area, but really tries to create a community feel.
Sorry, without looking ahead, as you go through these, I remember the criteria from above, but it said not every criteria has to be met. Did you call out in each of these maybe which criteria weren't met? Or get it to us later, but I'm just curious, there's like, I think 10 opportunity criteria. I'm just curious if
Yeah, so within the
existing zoning, for example, was one of those, so.
Yeah, so within our analysis of the existing sites in the report, we've called out what criteria they've met. We do not have them in the slide deck, though.
Okay.
We can get
all right.
that to you.
Thank you. It'd be important to know, just generally, why I'm saying is that if these are opportunities, but they don't meet existing zoning, then obviously a change would have to happen to capitalize on this. Councilwoman Ryder.
Yeah, so on that question, I mean, the one on the left, I could Google Renton Avenue and maybe find it, but if we wanted to know where these places were, are you able to tell us where you, maybe not in this moment, we can
Yeah,
get it by
maybe,
email.
yeah, we can definitely add that
Okay.
on and, yeah.
Because I think that lends
Sure.
to what Vice Mayor Smith just asked. If I were to say, ooh, I really like, or we're in the midst of Cottage Court, right?
Sure.
So I'm just curious, do we line up with the bottom left or the bottom right example? And I'm also curious about the one top middle. So there you
Understood.
go. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good feedback. We can add that. So the next one we'll explore is the neighborhood node typology and some examples that go along with this. So as Sean explained, this is that anchor or center of activity. This could also be that entry point into a neighborhood, and we'll explore that here in a moment. This is really an opportunity to redevelop sites at key intersections or gateways to the neighborhoods. Oftentimes, these are properties that may become vacant. There may be an opportunity to, for a developer to acquire one or more properties in these areas, and you may be able to get a little larger area to do some development in a meaningful way that really can bring activity to these corridors, as well as provide a good quality walkable link to neighborhoods and really connect directly to the CAT stop. So this is where we would see kind of low to mid-rise buildings with a walkable form. And in some cases, this could be a neighborhood serving destination or neighborhood commercial area. So the example that we'll share here is at the corner of Magnolia and Cherry. So the intersection right there, the River and Rail Theater Corp. A company is located on the northeast side of that intersection, just for reference there. We looked at this intersection because it's really, I think, a familiar development type for a lot of the intersections in kind of older commercial corridors throughout the city. And so what you would often see and do see is sometimes some redundancy in uses. For instance, you have a Family Dollar and a Dollar Tree. You've got a number of other uses. You've got an Arby's. You've got a church just outside of kind of our immediate study area. And then you've got, vibrant neighborhoods both to the north and the south. And we want to link to those neighborhoods and really maximize the ability to encourage redevelopment that is in support of those neighborhoods and creates a better linkage and front door to those neighborhoods. So that's what the neighborhood node typology really looks to achieve. This would be a place where you could also potentially look into some streetscape improvements to allow for better crossings across the street, allow for better connectivity to the neighborhoods, especially for pedestrians, for families that may either be trying to access the CAT stop or who may just be trying to access these areas or cross the street. So it's another example of of where we could start to see this kind of development occur.
Councilwoman Ryder.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Maybe I'm trying to put you in a box here, but how would you define complementing adjacent neighborhoods? Because I'm not sure that everybody would define it the same.
So I think that's a very good question, and thank you for asking that. So, it really would, I think, it's really important as these neighborhood node projects occur that there's appropriate neighborhood engagement, and that, both residents and business owners are interviewed, talked with, and I think some of that, could occur as the comprehensive planning process occurs. We often look at what the character of things that are historically there, look at the Magnolia Avenue Methodist Church, look at just a little bit further east on the corridor, there are some kind of older historical apartments that are being renovated. So that's the kind of character that we would look to probably replicate, and the scale of development that we would look to replicate in this specific area. But as a particular development would occur, we would recommend that additional engagement, where the developer would have, an open forum with the neighbors to say, hey, this is kind of what we're thinking. Do you think this is right? As far as our recommendations are concerned, we really do want to encourage those walkable linkages to the neighborhoods, have, the amenities that can get people safely to the CAT stops as well. And so those are also important as development occurs. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
More or less?
Yeah.
Councilwoman McKenzie.
Thank you. And so this is my district that you're looking at, and it is a district, part of the 6th district that has historically seen a lot of disinvestment over time. And since you did this this drawing, conceptual drawing, even the Dollar Tree is no longer there. It is closed down.
Yeah.
Since then. And so absolutely, I think the community engagement is going to be critical in this process, without a doubt. Because again, you'll also notice that on both sides of Magnolia, there are different scopes of housing.
Absolutely.
As I'm sure that you've seen, even on the Linden side versus the Fifth Avenue side of this community. So definitely a lot of community engagement, not just one meeting, but probably a series of meetings would be necessary.
I think in particular, as we thought about this intersection, and you mentioned that, the neighborhood to the north is different than the neighborhood to the south, it's an opportunity to create, maybe a better identity, better gateways to those neighborhoods as development occurs, to kind of better share the history of this area.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Thomas.
I'm going to throw kind of a general comment or question out, I suppose. I like the idea of these nodes that are the gateways and they're on the corridors, and you addressed possibly in some circumstances where you have businesses that are redundant. They may be making a profit, and that's okay, but it may not be the businesses that a particular neighborhood needs. So how do you, or can we encourage in these nodes more of businesses to come in that are actually what the neighborhood needs? They may not need another Dollar Tree, but they may need a pharmacy or a grocery store. So, I know we got a free market economy, so this is a little tricky, but how to make this really work, I guess what's the kind of incentive and the lure to bring in, to make a connection between a particular neighborhood and what they actually lack and what a business is willing to come in and provide?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I would say two things. I say one, I think it's similar in topic to what we just discussed about the need for this, surrounding neighborhood and property owner and business owner engagement. In that, in the next stages, when this helps to inform the comprehensive planning process, that will have a much more, we'll have a robust, community outreach and engagement process. I think capturing those preferences is exactly part of the purpose of the comprehensive planning process, to make a shared and guiding vision for the city going forward that can then be reflected on later when there is a proposal to put this, this kind of business on this corner at a, for sale commercial spot, is to say, well, the community's made it pretty clear, here's the kinds of things they're looking for, and this isn't really one of them. And to your point, or it is redundant to 3 other things within a half a mile or whatever the case might be. So I do think that engagement process will help capture that, and certainly just needs to fold into the comprehensive planning process. The other thing I did want to just mention, kind of in response to both of the comments we just received, is this is a really prominent intersection, obviously, in that, connections to neighborhoods off the corridor in both directions are very clear. Obviously, Cherry Street takes you to the interstate. Magnolia itself is a very prominent corridor. But what's really important here is emphasizing this as an example. When we looked at the Magnolia corridor, there was lots of kind of intersections or a couple of block areas we could have selected to identify that have very similar look and feel and the types of uses and things happening that we could have used as this representative example. And I think both in this process and in the upcoming comprehensive planning process, discussions around these kind of neighborhood nodes become really critical in setting a standard for other places that are not just this one specific intersection, because some sentiments are going to be similar to others about meeting those daily needs and the things that a neighborhood would want to see. So I just want to make that clear too, that these are meant to be examples because, promising development that, has neighborhood support and creates, meets those daily needs and is walkable and has amenities for neighborhoods. It's great if it happens here at Magnolia and Cherry. It's also great if it happens 3 blocks to the west or 3 blocks to the east. That's also important to the people who live near that intersection as well. So just want to emphasize that as well, because a lot of these prominent corridors have many key intersections, not just one. But yeah.
Councilmember Roberto.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I want to touch on something you had mentioned, which was getting people safely to the CAT stop. So I'm a big supporter of what you're proposing to do, especially around the corridors, and the streetscape idea, I think, goes hand in hand with that. And in doing that streetscape, I think you're providing opportunities for that safe transit from the housing that's existing and then the new housing to the CAT station. My question is, where or can microtransit fit in with this? Because we have folks who live, going to be living further away from this, who need to access CAT to be able to get to jobs or the doctor, things like that. We've seen, the course they have to go through to try to get to the CAT station. We currently have a microtransit pilot that Director Thorne's been running for a while. We're hoping to expand that project, but I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about where you see that type of project fitting in with a safety piece here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm happy to start that. And then Isaac, you may have some things you want to add there, but we believe that this is truly an opportunity for the city and CAT to partner with property owners, especially as areas are redeveloped. Oftentimes, that public investment comes, hand in hand and sometimes primes the pump for private investment. And we want it to be done so in a way that, really allows for people to get safely to those stops and from the neighborhood. So that goes without saying. For each of these example types, we are including kind of a list of what those appropriate first and last mile or micro-mobility recommendations might be. In addition to that, I think there's an opportunity for partnerships with, different entities to, provide space for, is it, additional bike racks? Is it, places for scooters? Is it, places for e-bikes? What is it? There's that whole suite. And so thinking through, what exactly fits in these areas and what's appropriate.
Yeah, I think for this particular area especially, Magnolia, Route 31 is one of our highest producing routes in terms of ridership. It's top 4 almost every single month, every year. With high frequency transit that we have, which is 15-minute service, we've actually seen increases with ridership. I think, microtransit, particularly in this area, probably not a great high use of microtransit. It's not really more of a first mile, last mile issue here. I think it's more so when you get further out to areas where we don't have any transit at all, where that could be a big possibility where we can use microtransit. But I think too, the nice thing is in Magnolia, we're talking about phase 2 of Streetscapes project, which is also going to help. But one of the major factors when we're talking about all these corridor routes is they're state owned. And so that's also an issue that we always run into. And it's just, city engineering working with TDOT to get some of the things we need in terms of sidewalks, signaling, whatnot.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Thank you. This is a broader question in general about all corridors, not specific to this, and taking a little bit of a different turn on the neighborhood meetings and talking to folks and having developers and so forth understand. I also think that is a two-way street in that neighborhoods need to understand what it takes for a business to be successful somewhere, and that means if you want it there, you need to patronize it in order to get it to stay, those kind of things. So I think sometimes there's a desire for things without an understanding of the magnitude of customer support you need to have something like that stay. So I say that to say that it's not managing expectations, but it's also saying, this is what is the possible right now. It doesn't mean it won't happen later, and that maybe there's an incremental step. It doesn't always have to go from totally empty to the perfect. But how do we begin moving in that direction? There has to be restaurants, businesses look around. What's the income level? What's the population level? How many people will patronize my business? And so I just think I would just ask, as we talk about that there be an understanding that it takes, both sides have to benefit from what goes there, and that it may not be able to get the perfect right out of the gate, but it's the beginning of the revitalization that will then drive more customers to come and then drive more desire to be developed there. And we see it all the time here that, the first stuff that goes in gets the most incentive because it takes the most incentive to get somebody to go be the first if the city does something like that. So that's all. Just be cognizant of that in the community meetings, I think, would help manage expectations and frustration level if it didn't turn out exactly what a community said they wanted right away.
That's helpful.
Councilwoman McKenzie.
Thank you. I want to circle back and ask this question. Magnolia Corridor Study, I think that was started actually back in either 2006, 2007. Were you guys privy to any of that data as you were looking at your analysis and your assessments?
Yeah, so as part of our kind of first part of work, we worked with staff to identify a number of previous studies, and we reviewed those. I think that there were some recommendations coming out of those studies that we thought through. So yeah, that was one that we referenced.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because, again, and I know that priorities change as well. It's been quite some time now since that was done, but ultimately transformed into the Magnolia redevelopment corridor. And so this sounds like something that would complement it. What I'd also want to caution is that we have people, business owners who don't live in the community, who are not from the community, who are sitting on somewhat blighted type properties or close to blighted, or they do just enough not for it to be labeled as blighted, that is really blocking this. And so I do agree that the incentives, and for some of them, have to be pretty attractive for them to want to sell and look at different investment. But then we also have businesses on Magnolia that are not necessarily ones that complement the community. And I will reference one that you have listed here, which is this Regency Hotel. We have at least two others in the community that are havens for drug and illegal and illicit activities there that I think are on radars for KPD as well. And so I don't know if that was recognized as well when you guys were looking at this, but hopefully if we're all working together, and I'm sure and I'm just stating these things because we will hear this in community conversations about what's needed. But again, we do have to get out and we have to patronize the businesses that are there. I mean, we've had when you talk about what's needed, we have certain things on one end of Magnolia as it transitions into Asheville Highway that used to be on Magnolia that didn't survive, such as a Walgreens where the Dollar Tree is, such as KFC, which recently went out of business as well. And so I think that how we roll this out, and again, as I said, multiple in this community. And if I recall correctly, the name of this grant is Areas of Persistent Poverty Grant, correct? And so I want to be very clear, as you guys I'm sure already know from working with planning, that this portion of my community absolutely fits that scope, and I hope would have some, not to say that any of the other corridor areas are not as important, but given that's the core of the grant, I really look and hope that it would be this area would be prioritized. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, so continuing on. From a neighborhood node perspective, again, often these are a little bit bigger areas. So this is 14 acres that we're looking at here along this corridor. This is actually an example from where I live in Indianapolis. So I know where this one is. It's an area I know very well. But we think that this is another opportunity to create places where that middle housing, can be created, and really start to think through how it could complement the neighborhood, how it could fulfill a need. You can see on the top right image there is on-street parking. So thinking through how streetscape improvements could again create that more walkable environment, slow down traffic, create a safer area, and an area that would also be more attractive to economic development and for businesses to locate. The next one I want to get to is the plaza redevelopment typology, and that's, I think something that has occurred all over the country, right, on major corridors. And so that is, mostly commercial shopping centers. As Sean mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, they are in a varying degree of, vibrancy. And we know that retail has changed over the last several years and continues to change. So as some of these properties become available, we wanted to have an example here of what type of complementary redevelopment could occur there. And really, this is about redevelopment. This is a place where you can start to achieve pretty significant acreage, usually under one or just a few owners. So they are a little bit easier for private development community to take on. Oftentimes, these areas do not have significant environmental issues, especially if they were, mostly retail developed in the last 50 years or so. And they are, mostly surface parked. And so thinking about how those areas might transition to additional housing and really support, the growing population you have here in the community and the housing needs you have here in the community, and do so in a way that really enhances the vibrancy of some of these corridors and offers really a different land use than exists in some of these areas. The other piece is, there's opportunities to kind of replace some of the older commercial and retail with newer, more modern commercial or retail that would then encourage economic development. So the example that we chose to have here is on Chapman Highway in Moody Ave. So it's kind of where there's the Bargain Hunters Antique Mall, and there's a number of commercial properties there along Chapman Highway at the intersection of Moody and Chapman. There's, cat stops there. It's adjacent to neighborhoods. There's quite a bit of jobs, kind of in this area as well. There's a lot of retail in this area, a lot of restaurants. There's the Sam Duff Memorial Park, and we think that the redevelopment of this example site, the other important piece is that it could generate usage at that park. The park could be an added benefit and destination for people that were to live in this area if it were to be redeveloped. There is kind of some multifamily development further south of the park, so it kind of matches the context of the type of development that we might see. And really is an opportunity to reimagine kind of this critical corner, which is, I think a very high visibility area. The other reason, as an example, we thought that this was really important is this is a place that most people know. And, but it is indicative of a lot of those different retail type establishments that may become available in the future. And the example that we showed there, you can start to see, and this was actually an example from Knoxville on the left there. So you got the Kearns Food Hall and some of the development around it that Davie, got about a 5-acre site. So you can start to see the scale of development that you already have in the community here. And this type of development, based on the market analysis that Development Strategies did, we believe, could be attractive at some of these sites throughout the community, especially some of these retail sites as they may become available. And then the last one I'll focus on here is the catalytic site. So, these could really fit into any of the prior 3 kind of scales of development, but they really are typically a large-scale site that is unique and has substantial economic development opportunity to really establish a new and mixed-use district. I think of the area around the Kearns Food Hall, for instance. I mean, to me, that is a catalytic site. That's an example if you want a local one. This really is intended for a mix of uses, variety of housing types, open spaces for visitors, et cetera. This is also a place where you could have a lot of different kinds of housing, a lot of different types of affordability of housing, kind of the full spectrum of housing from all the way from senior to places for, people just starting out as a family. And so we really think that this is a place where you could also begin to generate significant ridership if properly located along some of those cat lines. And the example that we chose to show here is actually a county-owned building today here on Central Avenue. So the kind of Central and Baxter, kind of between Pearl and Baxter. There's the Holy Ghost Catholic Church across the street, the 3 Rivers Markets. I think most of you are familiar with this site and kind of the area around it. And so this is an example of a catalytic site because it's publicly owned. There's been some conversations about, in the future, does this site redevelop into something that's, put back on the tax rolls and is an opportunity for a significant kind of development that really provides not only amenity for people that live in this development, but for the broader neighborhood and starts to, continue to play off of the recent streetscape improvements that the city's made along Central, so that public investment's already occurred. We think that this building could be adaptively reused in some way, and that there could be follow-on redevelopment around it as well. And an example here of kind of the scale of development, again, surface park type development, but there really could be a range of a scale of development from, that of adaptively reusing a portion or all of that existing former Sears, which is the county building, which kind of has an interesting facade, as well as kind of newer multifamily mixed-use development. There's an opportunity for commercial here. It's a large enough site where you could get some public space, which I think is really important. And then perhaps as you get closer into the neighborhoods, things like some of your middle housing types, so things like the attached townhome type developments shown on the bottom right. So providing a kind of a summary of to date as we kind of wrap up this conversation with you all, and appreciate your comments and questions so far. It's been super helpful. So we talked about at the beginning of this, CAT Reimagined occurred. There have been some zoning changes that the city's already put forward. And then, really this study is identifying opportunities to align development activity with transit-supported development along corridors. And so as we're working over the next several weeks to finalize a draft of this study, we'll obviously take your comments and questions into consideration. We'll try to address and integrate those as well as we can. But there's a lot of work that's been done already to try to enable this type of development, and we're hopeful that through this process that this will be a building block to hopefully see more of this investment. And so from a next steps perspective on kind of 3 different categories, we do think that further engagement with the development community, key property owners, is important. We have talked about a community survey to gauge understanding of and interest in this type of development as part of the comprehensive plan. Education, as well as community conversations about transit-supported development, is also a really important part of this. And it's something that, as we were talking about, this study can be an input to that. We recommend that the city create a working group with staff and key stakeholders as this plan is completed to review those key recommendations. And we've already started talking with staff about kind of, what some of those recommendations are. And beginning to also think about what are the other things that the city controls, such as land use and zoning. We're including recommendations in our study on how some of those things can be calibrated to further support transit-supported development, and also, the goals of, linking people safely with jobs, with critical resources, healthcare, education, as we also are cognizant of the fact that, this study is also, it's not only about housing, but about, how do we link people with resources that they need to combat disinvestment, persistent poverty. And then from a prioritized investment perspective, identify and prioritizing those catalytic opportunities for public-private partnerships, reviewing the sites and identifying the next steps, and continuing to collaborate with CAT, because really this is also a guide for them as development occurs, for them to make decisions about do they want to change the location of a station, or do they need to change the frequency of a line or anything like that as well. And we also believe that this could be a tool for CAT and for the city to use to apply for future grants.
Councilmember Thomas has a question.
Yeah, you actually covered some of my comments I was going to make, so I'll make it brief. But we talk a lot in Knoxville with the growth that we have now about density and infrastructure and whether existing infrastructure will support the density. A lot of those concerns go away when you get on the corridors, though, because you've got generally an infrastructure there that will support more density. And you get kind of a symbiotic effect where the more housing is kind of the horse that draws the cart as far as more businesses goes like that. So I think I'm safe to say on the council here, density on the corridors is something we pretty much all agree on. So the housing that can be put there is really just going to make it easier for people to get basic needs because the market's going to be there. And then, people have an opportunity for employment that's close at hand. There's a customer base and all the things that you guys already know. But I just wanted to kind of express that about, I don't think there's a lot of concern here about there being too much density on the corridors because that's where the transportation is and that's where the infrastructure is. So thank you.
Councilmember McKenzie.
Thank you, and my apologies if this was mentioned and I missed it. Do we have a scope of what the dollar amount of the grant?
It's $364,000 was what the grant was. It was a 80-10-10.
364,000?
I believe that's correct, yes. I will confirm that.
And as it relates to incentives, this may be for Amy or someone else. Do we have any thoughts around what the incentives would be for property owners at this point, or is that yet to be determined?
That's yet to be determined. I think our consultant team will provide us with additional recommendations, and then we'll build off of what the city has already developed as part of their key development priorities.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Fugit.
Thank you. I don't really expect anybody at either of these tables to answer, but I'm going to put it out there because I see some other city staff out there, and this is a question for later answer, but or a suggestion, a very strongly encouraged suggestion. It would be interesting to see what it would take to line up naming these corridors more along the line of redevelopment districts, which give us some more ability to do things. So as this, I don't know if this is considered in part of this plan, but I do think those things, if we're going to do this, they kind of need to go hand in hand so that the right hand and the left hand are all moving in the same direction, because if we talk about incentives, the redevelopment corridor opens up some options that are hard or that are otherwise more difficult to do. So I just think that would be a part. And I see the right person shaking their head, so I believe I've been heard. Thank you.
Councilman Roberto.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Director Brooks, we did the zoning code update back, and it became effective in January of 2020. And I reviewed the CG zoning on the use matrix today, and you know, CG is a lot of what you see along the corridors. So it has a permitted use of dwellings above the ground floor, which is, I think, what we're talking about when we're talking about a mixed use, where you might have a business on the bottom and residential on the top, as well as multifamily, townhouse, single family, and two family. If I basically said that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So we're already zoned and we're ready to go along the corridors since 2020. In 2022, we got an Opticos report that references the corridors 20 times. And it talks about higher development of housing located along the corridors and the edges of neighborhoods. It identifies housing-ready environments, and it identifies housing potential environments. And the map in the Opticos report is remarkably similar to what you showed us today, which I thought was a great map, by the way. But it's remarkably similar. That was in 2022. In 2023, Council passed a resolution, and it said to identify corridor areas with current infrastructure to support infill mixed use as allowed by the code. I think you've done that. We already did that in the Opticos too. Then it also says develop new incentive tools and outreach efforts to support mixed use residential developments along the corridors. So my first question is, since we passed the code in 2020 that allows this, since we have the Opticos report in 2022 that mentions it 20 times and identifies these areas, since Council passed a resolution 2 years ago saying let's do this, what has happened to develop the corridors?
I mean, that's a good question. And that's one of the reasons that, well, I will point out that, and I don't remember the date that the city updated their key development priorities, but that also includes very clear guidance around, you know, thinking about, includes the corridors where there's already infrastructure, you know, focusing on those primary transit corridors. And, you know, we could have created a map on our, you know, we did create a map, and that could have been sort of like, well, here we've identified these priority areas, and it's one of the reasons we wanted to engage a consultant team to help us better understand and kind of break down what are some of the barriers. Why are we not seeing more development along our corridors? And so that's what we're hoping through. That'll be the result of this study and help inform future efforts of, okay, we have incentives already in place. What else do we need to do to sort of target development along the corridors? And I think these conversations need to continue with the development community and through the neighborhoods along these corridors as well. I don't have a good answer for you, council member, but I do think that we already have a lot of tools in place.
I agree with you. We have the zoning in place. We already know the incentive tools. In the report, you identified specific areas, which I think is fantastic. One of them was on Long Sutherland. Has anyone reached out to whoever owns that property?
Not yet, but I think that could be a next step, is reaching out to some of these property owners and having some discussions with them, and trying to get them to think, as our team has already discussed, getting them to think a little differently about the properties that we have.
Well, has there been a shift in policy then? Because the last time we had one of these discussions, what was said to me was that we don't go out into the community to talk to people about their properties. They come to us. And I said at that time, that doesn't work. You need to go out and talk to people and educate folks. So are we going out and educating folks about the tools and the opportunities?
I can't speak to that. In terms of planning, that's not something that we typically do. I think when I say the collective we, is maybe that there is opportunities out there to have those conversations. I'm not saying that planning staff would be the ones well positioned to do that. We don't do implementation. But I think it's part of these larger community conversations that we have as part of the comprehensive plan. I would hope that some of those conversations could occur. But in terms of speaking of whether or not the city, specifically city staff, would go out, I would just defer to them.
And I don't expect that planning staff is going to go out and do that. My point is, I don't hear a lot of urgency with regard to doing this, and we have a supply problem with housing. Since 2020, we've seen a 60% increase in rents of people in that time frame, and that's a supply problem. So I would like to have seen a lot more urgency with regard to this, because the only place you're going to develop the units you're going to need to deal with the supply and demand issue is along the corridors. So I really appreciate your work, and I'm not directing anything at you all at all, but we need to have more urgency with this, because this needs to have gotten a lot further at this point, I think. And I think one of the things that we need to see a shift in is going out and educating folks about the opportunities, because there's a lot of opportunities out there along the corridors. There's a lot of opportunities to develop, and there's incentive tools that make it a really good option for everybody to do to do these things, and have a variety of housing that's available that people want to see, because people are moving here, and that's why we have a supply problem. And they're moving here because we've done a lot of work to have a good quality of life and to improve the quality of life over time. We're going to continue to see that. So I bring it up in the sense that we need to have more urgency about getting this done. Thank you.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Thank you. I agree with my colleague that, Councilman Roberta, that we've been talking about this for a while. I do think, as is often the case in these kind of conversations, we have to figure out who owns that responsibility to do some of that, because we have so many people that play a part: KCDC, city administration, planning, and I'm interested and hope the working group can very easily, perhaps, identify who should lead this effort. And I don't know if that's a part of your scope of work, but somebody does have to wake up every day and think about this. And there's so many things going on in the city, all pressing. But I share some colleagues' frustration in that we've been wanting this for a very long time, but there's a priority of things to do. But I do think a decision about who should take the lead in talking about going to property owners, identifying those, sharing it, and sparking some energy around that. We have a contract with the Chamber of Commerce. That they do they're interested in supporting economic development. Well, is this a way that we engage with the chamber as well? They talk to those folks, and they understand business in a way that might be helpful to fully engage them in this conversation. And I don't know if that's thought of, but government can't do it all. And I appreciate the point about getting a working group together, but somebody has to decide every day. It's part of their daily job to help develop these corridors quickly. So that's just it. And our friend Marlon McHale at the East Tennessee Realtors Association might be good to put on that team as well.
Councilwoman Ryder.
Yeah, so I will say maybe I agree with some of the sentiments, but I will also maybe well, let me just back up and say, so we actually had a very successful model that Councilman Thomas and I both were involved in to do similar work to this, and that was the Broadway Corridor Task Force. We were both involved in that, and that was a collaboration of both business members as well as neighborhood individuals. And I appreciate seeing that Ms. Sharp is here because the Office of Neighborhoods was highly involved in that. And that was a very successful, I want to say successful in the sense that there's some good collaborations and some positive stuff that came out of it. And we did some of the stuff that I hear council members talking about, which is make contact with business and owners up and down the corridor. We had the Broadway Shopping Center LLC members as members, and we met, I want to say, Councilman Thomas, we met every other month. Is that what we did? We had a meeting schedule, we had business members and community members, and we met and we made targeted plans, and things fell apart in COVID. That's what happened with Broadway Corridor Task Force. I came on council and handed leadership over to other people, and then things just kind of blew up in COVID, and they just haven't gotten back on track because the people that were involved got involved in other things and off track. So I guess along that conversation, I'd like to make a commitment to reviving that and know that I've had conversation with different staff in the administration of trying to revive the Broadway Corridor Task Force. For those who don't know and are here and aren't familiar with it, we did public workshopping meetings where the community came in and did visioning. One of the things that did happen that was the negative, number one, the zoning wasn't in place. This was prior to recode. Number two, we had property owners up and down Broadway. In fact, probably 4 or less property owners own a great number of the properties. And they will not redevelop, they will not invest, and they showed up at the meeting and wanted to know where the money was, and when there was no money on the table, they walked out the door, one particular person. And you can buy his property for millions of dollars, same price tag, maybe it's doubled in the last 8 years, I don't know. He's looking for the money, and that's all he wants, and owns a very key piece of property on Broadway in terms of its location. So it is a long process, and it is a difficult corridor with the ownership of the properties, with the TDOT requirements along there. And I think with city staff support and getting neighbors that are freshly committed to reviving that group, we can foster and bring them along. So I just bring that up to say to my colleagues, we have a model, we did things, and we can pull ours back together, but maybe that's the way to do it along the corridors. And one of the things we did was had different staff come and report to us what they were doing and what was going on along the corridor. And one of the few things that is still and is a success out of that is the Greenway connectivity that we're working on, which is also a very slow boat. So anyway, nothing happening fast until the people that own the properties decide they want to move along, and it requires a lot of constant conversations with them to make it happen. And it was done on a volunteer basis by neighbors to a large degree.
One question earlier in the criteria in the beginning was avoiding, I think, difficult, high-level issues might face development, brownfield. Are you suggesting stay away from those because those are more complicated, or there's a greater need, or?
It's a good question. I wouldn't necessarily say that it means, it makes it unusable or unpursuable necessarily. I think it's just more of in building the understanding, is some specific circumstance like that going to make it maybe for our studies purposes, perhaps too challenging to cite as an example for other places, maybe is the better way to put that. I I mean, brownfield redevelopment is a super important focus because it can obviously be detrimental to not reinvest them and clean them up and things of that nature. So I just mean more of, I think in building an understanding and as we were looking at different potential example sites, if there was any like major issues, maybe the whole site is in a floodplain, let's say. I don't know if that makes it a good example for other places because, you know, it's hard to explore opportunities when it's going to be very hard to build anything on that site, even if maybe it meets some of the other criteria. So that's more of what I was getting at. Doesn't necessarily have to exclude it, but it was just that it was a question we were asking ourselves as we were looking at different examples. That's
Okay. And just one question for Director Thorne. You know, as some of these, you know, these concepts get implemented over time, as they have, CAT evaluates those when they're sizable enough to consider increased frequency or a new stop. Can you talk about just briefly how you all assess those and maybe some examples?
Yeah, so really on the corridors, what we're trying to do with all of our corridor routes, which would be 11, 22, 41, 31, is get 15-minute service. Obviously, we have portions of 11, 17 that are 30-minute service. Route 31 is 30-minute service. Or I'm sorry, 15-minute service on Route 31, 15-minute service on portions of Route 11. We would like to get Route 22 and Route 41 to 15-minute service. Those are some of our long-term goals because we do believe those routes with higher frequency would induce more ridership. Those are our top 4 routes every month, every year. So I think as you develop with transit-supported development along these corridors, there's going to be a higher need for more high-frequency transit. We're obviously in the process, too, of creating an accelerated bus corridor along Broadway. We're in the planning stages of that. That's hopefully comes online in 2027, 2028, but it is a long process. Some of the hiccups, though, that we're faced as we try to do this is obviously traffic signal prioritization, making sure that we can provide that high-level frequency service with on-time performance. So.
And I heard you at the beginning say that the result of CAT Reimagined, that 2024 was the highest ridership in
2025, yeah.
24,
So we just ended last fiscal year. That was our highest ridership in about a decade, 10 years.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you for that. I thought I heard that recently. Wanted to make sure. That's a good good result. Any other questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, thank you all. Again, I know some of you reorganized life things and traveled here from afar, so thank you for that. Appreciate it. And the work continues. So thanks to everybody who contributed to this presentation. And we're adjourned. Thank you.